Hello, everyone. Jared Hoffman here with another HBCU Sports exclusive video here to give you my takeaways from week 8 of the HBCU football season. Let's just get right into it with the biggest talking point of the weekend, which was Southern head coach Terrence Graves' hot seat just got a little bit hotter. He's not the only one that's on the hot seat. Obviously, Cedric Thomas with Alcorn State, who lost to Florida A&M this weekend. He I'm pretty sure there's going to be some discussions had within Alcorn State and their athletic department. James Colsey, who was also on the hot seat before, their win against Alcorn, he gets the rest this week. The fact that he got Florida A&M their first conference win of the season in their homecoming contest. But someone who was not so lucky to escape some of the hot seat discussions was Terrence Graves, who took Southern into their homecoming contest, and unfortunately, it did not go their way whatsoever. As Prairie View A&M marched into Baton Rouge and came away with a 24-3 win, and we had some pointed comments from Jermaine Jackson after the game about how Southern should. His exact quote was, "Let it be a cold day in hell before they schedule us for homecoming again." Those were his exact words. So somebody you could clearly tell that he was motivated to win that game, and they got the job done. But back to Terrence Graves and why the hot seat discussion is so hot for him this weekend. It's because his AD, or Southern's AD, Roman Banks, had some very interesting comments after the game when talking to the media, talking about how the season isn't going the way they wanted it to after last season when they appeared in the SWAC championship game. He thought that, that was a positive sign for them, and that maybe they could turn it into a potential run back to the SWAC championship game again, or maybe that he liked his chances, based on who was in the locker room and the success that they had last season. Fast forward now through 8 weeks into the season, Southern is 1-6, and they dropped to 0-3 in conference play. Their only win of the season against Mississippi Valley State doesn't even count toward their conference record. And even if the other game that they had against a SWAC opponent, Alabama State, had counted toward their conference record, it wouldn't be good either way because they lost 30-7 in that game. So their 3 conference contests this year, they lose 38-13 to Jackson State, 45-14 against Bethune-Cookman, and now they have a 24-3 loss, and I believe, their division opener against Prairie View A&M. So you're talking about a 20+ point differential, negative point differential for Southern in 3 conference games, and it gets worse when you include their non-conference games against Alabama State and North Carolina Central. Keep in mind, all of those are FCS opponents. We're not even talking about their 56-7 loss to Fresno State. So it has not gone Southern's way. So Roman Banks was not pleased with the performance in this game, and it's not been pleased with this how the season has gone for Southern. So when talking to the media, and I believe it was an open statement, I don't believe that that there was a question asked. I believe he just volunteered an open statement and really talked about, again, his frustrations over the season so far, and how you don't just make a decision after firing a coach. You have discussions and things of that nature. I'm paraphrasing because I don't have that direct quote, but basically he started a discussion about whether or not this was Terrence Graves' last game coaching. Terrence Graves, during the SWAC call, I believe, made it clear that he is still the head coach at Southern for now, until told otherwise, and that he's going to continue to do this job. What coaches say when they're in hot seat discussions. But yeah, it's a cause for concern because this is your AD making these public comments about how he's disappointed with how the season has gone so far, and how discussions should be had and are probably going to be had, at some point, maybe after the season, maybe it could be as soon as next week, because Southern is going to get their chances of making it to the SWAC championship game are not looking good right now. I mean, that's an understatement. I don't think I think we done crossed that bridge, But yeah, it's not been a good year for Southern at all. This is probably one of their worst seasons in quite a while since before since before the 2010s. Probably they haven't had a season this bad, So and Terrence Graves is going to be continue to be the topic of conversation unless Southern can just go on a magical run for the rest of the season, which would not be outside the realm of possibility because I don't want to say it gets easier from here, but their schedule is kind of light. Next week they have Florida A&M at home. They go on the road to play Arkansas Pine Bluff. They go on the road to play Alcorn. And they host Texas Southern for their home finale. And then, of course, you have the Bayou Classic. So those are fairly winnable games. But again, the way that Southern has played this season, it's not that simple. It is not that simple. And, quite honestly, this could be Terrence Graves fighting for his job. He said now he has made it clear that he made it clear after the game that every game he's coaching for his job. So he goes into it with that mindset, but he really it should be times two for these last 4 or 5 games of the season because this could. I mean, I'm to the point where I feel like the decision has already been made. That's what I think. If you ask me, what do I believe? I feel like a decision has already been made on what is going to happen with Terrence Graves after this season. But hey, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Terrence Graves can go on this magical run where he ends the rest. He goes unbeaten for the rest of the season. Get some clear, concise wins on his resume, and potentially saves his job for at least another year, but I don't see that. I don't know. I just don't know. This season has not gone well and it's not just the fact that they are losing. It's the fact that these games are not even close. 31-14 in North Carolina Central, 30-7 against Alabama State, 38-13 against Jackson State, 45-14 Bethune-Cookman, a Bethune-Cookman team who has not had a winning record since they've been in the SWAC. And that's their worst loss so far. That's their worst loss against a FCS opponent, of course. And then you lose 24-3 against Prairie View A&M. So it's kind of hard to wipe that slate clean and coach the rest of the season, knowing that it's possible that you're not going to be here next season. But we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out. But Terrence Graves' hot seat got even hotter this weekend, and we'll see if he can get himself out of the fire. Next up, we have Albany State and Benedict setting themselves up for a collision course this weekend following some huge victories against Tuskegee and why am I forgetting who Albany State played this weekend? No, Albany State played Tuskegee. That's why I was confused. Albany State beat Tuskegee and Benedict beat Edward Waters. Lord have mercy, my brain. But yeah, Albany State and Benedict both get big wins, remain unbeaten in conference play, and they set up a matchup this weekend that could decide who will go to the SIAC championship game. Benedict get the win over in a hard fought win over Edward Waters, winning with a last second touchdown to last second go ahead touchdown to get a win over Edward Waters. A lot of missed opportunities for Edward Waters in this game. This was a very winnable game for them. Had a couple of turnovers that they couldn't capitalize on, had some turnovers themselves that Benedict turned into points. And there was a sequence at the end of the first half that I believe won Benedict the game, where Edward Waters turns the ball over and they give the ball to Benedict and at their 7-yard line, 7 yards away from the end zone. And then Benedict on the very next play from scrimmage on offense, fumble the ball themselves, and Edward Waters returns it to their side of the field to set up for a field goal to make the score what would have been 10-10 before at halftime. But Benedict blocks the field goal, scoops it and returns it for a touchdown. So now instead of it being a 10-10 game, it's a 17-7 game at halftime. And Edward Waters did all it could in the second half to give themselves a chance to win. Eventually took the lead in the fourth quarter, and they traded the lead back and forth with a couple of scores in the fourth quarter. But it was Benedict who ended up on top after Tristan Morgan caught a 16-yard pass for a touchdown from Darius Ocean. I was about to say Tristan Thompson. Tristan Morgan was very huge on that final drive for Benedict to set up that eventual game-winning touchdown. And Benedict gets a win by the skin of their teeth. It wasn't the prettiest performance for them, but it was much better than what they were last week against Fort Valley State. And that's exactly what they needed, everything to win this game, and they got it. Had a couple of moments where it was looking kind of shaky, but the defense stood tall and helped them out when the offense couldn't really get it together. And that's a big win for Benedict. Meanwhile, Albany State, it was all defense for them. It was all defense for them because the offense, the usual Albany State offense was not there this weekend. Of course, you're going to point to the injuries. Isaiah Knowles, who was there when the team was averaging 50 points per game through the first couple of games of the season, he went down in the injuries. And in this game, Jaden Kinney, who was stepping in for Isaiah Knowles after his injury, he goes down with an injury now. So now you have Zaylen Bell in the game, and he's a completely different type of quarterback than Jaden Kinney and Isaiah Knowles. He's more of a guy who tries to do it with his legs. He's very athletic. He made some very good athletic plays in this game, escaping pressure, and getting the ball downfield for helping them move the ball downfield with his legs. So he played solid given, the circumstances. I'm pretty sure he didn't expect to play in this game, but he met the opportunity pretty well. I'd say didn't have the perfect game, but why would you expect him to have the perfect game? This is his first time stepping on the field, so, but I think the theme of this game is missed opportunities for Tuskegee. Bryson McGrew, who was not the regular starter to come into the season for Tuskegee. I think he stepped in a couple of games into the season, and he had a lot of opportunities to hit open receivers for big plays. There were so many plays in this game where Tuskegee receivers beat the Benedict DBs down the field. There's so many different plays, and he just missed them. It just every single time it sailed over the receiver, and those were big plays that could have changed the momentum of the game, but they just could not capitalize on the opportunity. It didn't have the chemistry down. He didn't have the chemistry down between him and his receivers. Just let him too far out, and it ended up with them not having any turnovers when they probably could have had 5 or 6. With all due respect to Mr. McGrew, but with a better quarterback, Tuskegee wins this game without a shadow of a doubt, and it's not even close. All the plays where receivers beat the defense downfield, they got behind the defense and looked like they could have just coasted into the end zone, and the ball was overthrown. And then at the end of the game, Bryson McGrew, his passing numbers are 8 for 35. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but those are not the numbers you want from your QB1 whatsoever. But Benedict gets a big win over Albany State. They hold on. They clinch the win with a big defensive stop. They get the interception. Now, the thing I need to point out to give Bryson McGrew credit is in the second half, he had it going. He was moving the team downfield. They just couldn't every single time they had drives where they were able to move the ball downfield. They just could not capitalize and put it into the end zone or convert on fourth down or convert on third down. It was always the important plays in the drive that they could not execute. First and second down, they were doing so well. But it would always be when it got to third and fourth down that Tuskegee just could not capitalize in on drives that seemed like they were for sure scoring drives. But Albany State reaps the benefits. They remain unbeaten in conference competition, and it'll be Benedict and Albany State this weekend with potentially a on. Now, I'll say this. Albany State is looking very vulnerable because this offense looked the worst it has all season. You look at the numbers from a rushing standpoint, and it's pretty impressive. Algernon Thomas, he had 114 on 12 carries. Ty Weish had 94 yards on 18 carries, including the only touchdown in the game for either team. But you're going up against an elite Benedict defense. They're going to have you have that run game penciled in. But I do got to give them credit though, running for 258 against a Tuskegee run defense that was actually pretty good going into this game. I think they led the SIAC going into this game, so I think that's pretty significant. But I look at this Benedict defense and I'm saying, with that defensive line, I don't know if you're going to have those same opportunities that you had in this game. But we'll have to see how that plays out as Benedict and Albany State match up this weekend with a conference championship berth on the line. Next up, we shift over to the CIAA, where we have Johnson C. Smith and Virginia Union coming away with dominant wins. Johnson C. Smith played homecoming spoiler, while Virginia Union got a big homecoming win. So Johnson C. Smith went in to Raleigh to face Shaw for their homecoming, and they made you talk about somebody who regrets scheduling somebody for their homecoming. I'm pretty sure Shaw regrets scheduling Johnson C. Smith for its homecoming because it ended up in a 52-0 shutout. Nothing more that needs to be said there. Johnson C. Smith, they needed a dominant win, and they got one, and then some against Shaw. Just unfortunately, Shaw. It's not fair to really judge Shaw this season because they're in their first season under Lamar Manigo, so you can't really say much about how the season has turned out for them. This is just, I'm pretty sure this is a learning process for them, and they're going to come back much better. But Kelvin Durham and this Brian Lane, DeAndre Proctor, they just were flying down. Just big plays galore. They combined for 10 receptions for 252 yards. 10 receptions for 252 yards. Between two receivers, they averaged 25 yards per reception. That's how the game turned out for Shaw, having to deal with that. So Johnson C. Smith needed this win badly, with Virginia Union and Fayetteville State both being 4-0 in the conference. Johnson C. Smith still has a matchup upcoming against Fayetteville State, and that's going to be a must-win for them when that happens. Already have a loss on their resume against Virginia Union, so a loss against Fayetteville State would be the kiss of death for them. But they got a huge dominant win this weekend to keep themselves in that discussion. And Virginia Union got a 66-24 win over Lincoln, Pennsylvania. This is the 13th straight homecoming win for Virginia Union. And I believe this is like the 7th time during that streak that they played against Lincoln and won. So, but props to Lincoln because the last 4 or 5 homecoming games for Virginia Union, they didn't allow a single score. They had shut out all of their homecoming opponents in the past 4 homecoming games that they've had. And Lincoln found a way to score 21 points, had a 21-point stretch in the third quarter. Their quarterback, Hamas Duran, excuse me, I apologize if I said your name wrong. He had a pretty good second quarter before the end of the half to make it 24-21 after going down 21-0 in the first quarter, or to start the second quarter. But and in the end, it was just too much Curtis Allen. It was too much Virginia Union, and they came away with a 66-21 win. While we're on the subject, I wanted to make this a separate take, but I'm gonna just keep it within the confines of this. Curtis Allen is the CIAA Player of the Year. With that much is very much clear. But I'm to the point where I feel like he should be a leading candidate for the Deacon Jones Trophy. This man has been dominant, and that word kind of is losing its meaning. I don't think it's a strong enough word for what Curtis Allen has been this season. In this game, he had 208 yards on 24 carries and scored 3 touchdowns. In every game this season, he has had 100 yards and at least 2 touchdowns. Every single game this season, he's had at least 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. In 3 of the last 4 games, he's had 200 yards and at least 2 touchdowns. In the game that he didn't have 200 yards, he had 185. He has 1,380 yards this season, 1,380, with 3 games to go in the season. With 3 games to go in the regular season, by the way, they could still end up in the CIAA championship game and the D2 playoffs, so that the Virginia Union single season rushing record could be shattered by the time Virginia Union's done. But he needs to be in that discussion, and if you ask me, I think he should possibly be leading that discussion. There are guys that unfortunately had some things go against them where, Isaiah Knowles got hurt, and I thought he was a candidate to win it. Andrew Body at one point looked like he was a leading candidate for the Deacon Jones Trophy, but I'm not sure how much the Jackson State loss is going to hurt him. Jacobian Morgan would have been a leading candidate, but he missed a couple of games at the start of the season. Curtis Allen, to me, has been the most consistent player in Black college football this season from week 0 to week 8, going into week 9. There has been no one who has been more consistent at all compared to what Curtis Allen is doing right now. And if you asked me, he is the leading candidate for the Deacon Jones Trophy. If you ask me, as of right now, Virginia Union should have back-to-back Deacon Jones Trophy winners. And it wouldn't even be a second thought to me. That's how dominant Curtis Allen has been. And he could very well run his way to a 3rd straight CIAA championship for Virginia Union. So that's my hot take for the video. Virginia Union gets a 66-21 win over Lincoln to remain unbeaten in conference play and have won 5 straight since their loss to Edward Waters. And Johnson C. Smith gets a 52-0 shutout for Shaw's homecoming and keep themselves in play for a CIAA championship berth. Next up, we have Tennessee State sweeping the home and home against Howard. They get a win on their homecoming contest. So last year, Tennessee State, they spoiled Howard's homecoming, in the first of the home and home, and they get their 2nd win of the season this year with a 24-7 win over Howard. Bryson McNair, I'm not sure if there's any relation to Steve Eyre or Fred McNair, but he had Byron McNair. I apologize. Byron McNair. Not sure if there's any relation to the other McNairs, but he was super efficient in this game. Only 4 incomplete passes on 22 attempts, had 174 yards and 3 touchdowns in this game. They had multiple receivers, catching passes, and had 3 different receivers catch touchdowns in this game. And how the only MEAC team that played this weekend, they get a damaging loss as they go into conference play this weekend. Tariq Starks had a disappointing outing, 14-27, 116, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions in this one. The run game, that's usually strong for Howard, only averaged 2 yards a carry, this is just not the performance that Howard wanted as they prepare for conference play against a Tennessee State team that was really struggling. This was a Tennessee State team that was really struggling, and this was very much a winnable game for Howard. through the videos that I've seen on social media, a lot of their fan base, turned up in Nashville for this one. So, this was a prime opportunity for them to play homecoming spoiler as they prepared for the start of conference play, and it just didn't materialize for them. So Howard goes into conference play with a believe 2-5 record, if I'm not mistaken. Well, no, excuse me, 3-4 record, and they're going to be looking for answers, and it's not going to get much easier for them because they have Morgan State to start their homecoming, their conference schedule as they begin their pursuit for a MEAC title. Meanwhile, Tennessee State has a chance to uh, get its first win in the Big South Ohio Valley Conference when they go up against Western Illinois, and it'll be at home, so that's good news for them. They don't have a good record at all this season, but their 2 wins have come at home. So we'll see if they can make it 500 at home. They're currently 2-3 at home, but yeah, I'm not sure if there's more that needs to be said about that. I hope that this isn't the last home and home that Tennessee State schedules as far as homecoming goes. I would love to see them, do this with North Carolina Central, maybe even Morgan State, two teams with deep rooted histories in HBCU football. I think that'd be a good way to, to highlight the history of both of those programs, and and give us a matchup that we don't usually see or have not usually seen in years past. I would love to see Tennessee State and South Carolina State. That would be, you talk about two programs with deep rooted histories in HBCU football. Those two are, if there were to be HBCU blue bloods, those would be two HBCU blue bloods. But we'll see going forward. But as for the Tennessee State Howard home and home, Tennessee State gets the sweep, and they're going back into conference play, looking to create some momentum as they get back into conference play. Lastly, looking forward to this weekend. Look, I'm gonna be very honest with you guys. This weekend, I'm not gonna say it was horrible because there was some good action this weekend. I'm not gonna lie to you. There were some very good games this weekend. But I'd be lying if I said that there were any meaningful games to have been had this weekend. There was not much to write home about. There wasn't too many must-see games from this past weekend. But this upcoming weekend now, we got some good ones. We already talked about Benedict and Albany State, who are on a collision course to meet this upcoming weekend. We got North Carolina Central and Delaware. I'm basically giving away my games to watch for this weekend. Look for the article this Friday. But North Carolina Central and Dale State, they meet in the first week of the first full slate week of MEAC play. Jackson State and Grambling meet in the Las Vegas HBCU Classic, the historic inaugural I was about to say first annual. I was about to make Chris so mad. The inaugural Las Vegas HBCU Classic. We got the Magic City Classic between Alabama A&M and Alabama State. So we got some good matches to look forward to this upcoming weekend, and I'm just looking forward to what we have in store this upcoming week. We got the conference championship races at the Division II level heating up. MEAC conference play starting. The SWAC race. It gets going this weekend. So I'm looking forward to the games we have upcoming, and I'm ready. I'm just ready to look past what we just saw and looking forward to what we will see this upcoming week. On paper, this is the most important week in HBCU football that we have upcoming, outside of course, when Jackson State met Alabama State, which still reigns supreme as the game of the year so far. But that's going to do it for this week's takeaways. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the HBCU Sports YouTube channel. Follow us on all of our social platforms, and go to hbcusports.com for all the latest news in HBCU sports. Until next time, I'm Jared Hoffman. See you guys.